Okay, hello, CUNA. So what I will be reviewing is there was a hearing on the House, one of the House committees. This is House Bill H406 regarding fentanyl sentencing for convicted traffickers, and I'm basically I think the main conflict is the mandatory minimums. Um, Here's the House bill. Uh, Sponsors include Representative um, Durant, and then also you'll see on the Senate side, um, Senator Lakey is going to be talking about it. So these are the representatives that CUNA essentially elects. So Representative Durant, and then also Senator Lakey. So I'm gonna kind of watch it live with you guys. Um, I haven't. Brian Allman, he has a pretty good uh, article on it, and there was, I guess, some comments that are not too appreciative. So let's start with, I don't want to like get into like state level politics. I mean, this is CUNA focused, and there are plenty of other people focusing on this. So I'll just point out things that I thought were kind of interesting. So here is Senator Lakey talking about this bill.
Identify yourself and tell us what you know. You have 3.5 minutes.
I'll do my best. Mr. Chairman and committee members, Todd Lakey, State Senator from District 23, and it's an honor to be in front of your committee, Mr. Chairman. Idaho is a great place to live and raise a family, and part of the reason it's a great place to live is because of our low crime rate. We have really safe communities in Idaho. People are fleeing Oregon and Washington and California to come to Idaho. If you've been to Portland or Seattle or San Francisco or even Ontario, it's pretty clear why. Part of the reason Idaho is great is because we have made strong, clear policies that we don't support drug dealers by making it easier for them to do business in the state of Idaho. Specifically, we have mandatory minimum sentences for those participating in drug trafficking in Idaho. We have drug dealers on tape declining to do business in Idaho because of the mandatory minimum sentences. They know about those sentences and they don't want those consequences. Currently, we have mandatory minimum sentencing for those that traffic in dealer quantities in marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin. And Mr. Chairman, heroin used to be the worst of the worst. But fentanyl literally exponentially surpasses heroin in lethality. 2 milligrams is a potential lethal dose, you've heard that. We have our deterrent and our line of defense for trafficking in heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine. We do not have that same deterrent, that same line of defense against fentanyl in Idaho. And with that break in our defense, fentanyl is pouring through it. Fentanyl is a scourge. We have more and more coming into Idaho, and the number of fentanyl deaths is rapidly increasing each year. Our undercover officers even say it's hard to find heroin because fentanyl is replacing it. Fentanyl is cheaper to make, much more powerful in smaller amounts, and we have no trafficking statute for fentanyl. It's not rocket science why fentanyl is increasing so rapidly. Our officers have to carry Narcan to save those they come in contact with and save fellow officers that may come in contact with fentanyl. And I know we back the blue. Our law enforcement has been pleading for this drug trafficking statute for at least 3 years. This bill uses the same structural enforcement language that we have in place for methamphetamine, for heroin, and for cocaine. The quantities are different, but in this case, we know there's no question what we're talking about are dealer quantities. 100 to 250 pills is the initial threshold. 4 grams of fentanyl, if 2 milligrams is a lethal dose, a potentially lethal dose, that's 2,000 potentially lethal doses in our minimum tier. We're talking about dealers, we're not talking about users. Drug trafficking is not a nonviolent crime. Dealers are selling a deadly poison to others that they know will ruin their life, ruin their family, ruin their employment, and can take their life. Drugs like meth, coke, and heroin certainly can and do cause overdose and death, but fentanyl is a whole new level. And this bill, as was mentioned, adds a section for drug-induced homicide because these drugs do kill. There's a reason that 86% of Idahoans and our constituents support adding fentanyl to the mandatory trafficking statutes. It's time to act. It's time to act to protect and support the people of Idaho.
We need to wrap up, Senator. Thank you.
One more sentence, Mr. Chairman. It's time to act to support our law enforcement and pass House Bill 406 to help stem the flood of fentanyl in our state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll call you up at the end of testimony.
Okay, and if you want to see the full hearing, you can see it on the YouTube channel. I just uploaded the video. All right, so I think there was a brief moment. It's pretty funny. The rhetoric, I guess, according to Allman's article, is pretty strong. I just want to see if this has this clip here.
Richie, and I apologize, I can't.
Chiefs of Police Association as well as a constituent. And unfortunately, I don't have a cool name like Jelly Roll, but I'll try. I have some nicknames from these officers in the crowd, but I try. Chiefs, sheriffs, line officers, and prosecutors agree on anything. And unfortunately, fentanyl is the thing that has brought us all.
I mean, you can just check it on Brian Allman's article. I'm just going to get through this. All right. So they took a break, and then where's the sheriff? Ada County Sheriff spoke here. So I don't think anybody's minds are going to be changed. Senator Lakey, you heard him speak. Um, and then Representative Durant is a sponsor of the bill. So there we go. There's Ada County's sheriff. So remember, the city of CUNA contracts out to the sheriff to basically have designated units on site. So, all right, here he is.
Well, my notes say good morning, but yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Clifford, and I'm the sheriff of Ada County. As most of you know, prior to being elected sheriff, I have worked for the last 21 years as a deputy here in Ada County, with a lot of time on the street as a canine handler that worked hundreds of drugs investigations. During my time in law enforcement, I have not seen a scarier drug trend than fentanyl. I'm here today to support this bill for both my office and for the Idaho Sheriff's Association. Most of what I have written down has already been exhausted. I think what I'd really like to put forth is, we hear a lot of things, a lot of testimonies, but remember, we are talking about adding a dangerous drug to the list of already dangerous drugs that we have that are in our Idaho State Code. A drug that is more dangerous than, that we would consider more dangerous than cocaine and meth and heroin. Our drug laws here are some of the toughest in the nation. And I do believe that it is a deterrence. You've heard testimony of, it sounds like Miami Vice, but the drug cartels pay attention to what we are doing state to state. And they know here in this state, there are higher penalties for dealing drugs and bringing large quantities into our state. So I would urge you to support the bill. I'd love to take the rest of my time to answer any questions that you may have already asked, because quite frankly, some of the questions are technically incorrect. Some of the answers are technically incorrect, and I'm here for whatever you have.
Representative Mathias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff Clifford, thanks for being here this afternoon and this morning. So this is a question that I don't think has been asked of anyone who's testified, but it's a common theme that we've heard over and over, and that is all of us want to target the traffickers. None of us want to target I'll call them simple users. Why is there so much reluctance to add language that would clarify that legislative intent and make sure that we're not scooping up people who might have 100 pills, but we're talking about the people who might have 100 pills and cash and scales and baggies and guns and incriminating texts and evidence that I think some people on this committee would like to see to help us be more comfortable that we aren't going to use this law to just scoop up users?
Chairman, Representative Mathias, I think that's a great question. I think when I looked at this and some of the things that people were against and people were for, and some of the things that I just kind of heard is, I think we inadvertently want to tell stories in our state code. Some of the questions that were even asked and all the situations that are, what if this, what if that? Our state code is not for the stories behind what is happening to the individual. It's a guideline for us as law enforcement and for prosecutors to say, do we charge this person with this crime based on the story that we see before us? So I do understand your question. And I think that it's much simpler to say, this is the penalty if you have these large quantities, instead of tell the story of every user that says, well, if you can have large quantities, if this is what your habit is, you can have large quantities if this is what your habit is. That's up to us as law enforcement and prosecutors to work together to realize, is this person really a user? And I've experienced that in my time, somebody with a trafficking amount of drugs that actually was a user, and you go forward accordingly. I think we want to take the, when we ask the scenario questions, a lot of people want law enforcement officers to be robots until it's time for them to not be a robot, and it's hard to have both. The law is a guideline for us to say, this is what's sitting in front of us. It's not black and white. It's not a little ticker tape's not going to fly out of our brains and say, you get charged with this because of black and white. Every situation we run into is differently. For example, we'll oversimplify it. Speed limit, right? Well, the law says that you have to drive the posted speed limit. What it doesn't say is, well, if your wife's in labor, then you might speed a little bit. Or, you're having a medical problem, your mom's on her deathbed, so you might speed a little bit. It's up to us as law enforcement officers to say, hey, you're speeding. Hey, my wife is pregnant. You're right. I mean, probably we shouldn't give you a speeding ticket. So that's kind of the answer I have. It's a guideline for us to say what's really happening here. The prosecutors use it as well, and we do work together with the prosecutors to do what's right by our citizens.
Representative Allgood.
Thank you for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you.
It's been brought up today, and as an experienced law enforcement officer, you encounter 4 or 5 ounces of marijuana. Somehow, you detect that marijuana may have some fentanyl in it. Are you going to charge that person with possessing 5 ounces of fentanyl?
Chairman Skog and Representative, that is all. I really appreciate you asking that question because I'm not sure it was answered correctly before. The answer is no. The use behind the mixtures thereof, that's because when almost any drug that you have here in Idaho, not all of them, but most of the time when you get large quantities, I don't care if it's meth or cocaine or fentanyl, it's going to be cut with something, right? It's been stepped on, like Donahue said. So we take it in its totality, not we have 5 ounces of marijuana and it is now 5 ounces of fentanyl. I think that is that's a great story to tell, to think that is going to happen. I don't think I would know any officer on the street that would say, well, we're going to charge them with 5 ounces of fentanyl because it's a mixture of marijuana and fentanyl. I understand the concern. It's not reality.
Representative Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Sheriff Clifford. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you said about the intent and the lack of it in this legislation, that you, as the initial finder of the person, that you have some discretion, and you will use your own discretion to choose the path where this is going to go. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Chairman, Representative, absolutely. And the reverse is true as well. So let's say I use my discretion to say, hey, I think this has happened, and the prosecutor has a bigger look at it, and maybe more investigation is even done. They can actually, they can bring the charge up if they need to. So it's not just my choice. We kind of work as a team to figure out what's the whole story. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, and this also answers the question from previously, pulled over a car. He's got 5 grams of, or he had almost, it's like half an ounce of heroin in the car. Okay. Well, that is traffic amounts here in Boise, right? It's very trafficking here. Well, he's not from here. He's from California, and he had just gotten here in California. That's not trafficking. And so he brought it here to use because he knew he could get heroin cheaper in California and bring it here to Idaho and use it and not deal with it. Now, my interviews with him, the investigation in total tells me, yes, that is correct. It's still a felony to possess it, but he's not here to sell it. So that's the discretion I have.
Representative Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff Clifford. So I'm a big fan of the American criminal justice system, and one of the unique things about it, not only compared to other systems in the world, but also just compared to other things that we encounter in American life, is that it is a system that works with checks and balances of all 3 branches of government and of the people. And what I mean by that is, in a typical case, you've got your folks, law enforcement folks, part of the executive branch, investigating crimes and so forth. You've got prosecutors, part of the executive branch, prosecuting crimes. You've got us, legislators, who are passing these laws, and you've got the judicial branch involved through sentencing and through judicial discretion at sentencing, and you've got the people involved who have the right to be jurors and to kind of act as an ultimate check and balance on the whole system. In this law, we are taking away the involvement to some extent of the judicial branch and its discretion, and giving that discretion to the executive branch, to you folks and the prosecutors, and we are, as a legislature, acting in a way for the jury. We're saying
Representative Cannon, is this a question or a long argument?
This is a question, but it is a long question.
Wrap it up.
Thank you. We are saying through this law, if we pass it, that under certain circumstances, namely the weights listed here, that we are making the determination that is typically the jury determination as to intent. We're saying if you have X, you have intent. I'd like you to, I hear what you're saying about prosecutorial discretion and law enforcement discretion. Do you feel like it's necessary to take away judicial discretion and the check that provides, and the discretion of the jury and the check that provides?
Chairman, Representative Cannon, great question. I understand exactly what you're saying, because I do believe in that whole system as well and have preached it forever about legislation makes the laws, I enforce the laws, judiciary finds if they are constitutional. So I'd say yes and no. I don't think we take away the judiciary discretion because we do have the jury portion of it, right? We have the jurors and the judicial that can determine if that law is, if it's even valid that person has been charged with that crime. I hear the other part of it to say, well, now there's no judicial discretion on how they get sentenced, correct? So it doesn't take away the discretion on if that person is guilty or not. So there's the judicial part doing what it does. I do have concerns with so much discretion at the hands of one single person, because even my discretion as a law enforcement officer on the street doesn't mean that, hey, this is it. We have a big inconsistency with our judicial system. Nothing against judges. They're great people. They work hard and make good decisions. But here we can at least say it's not going to be one person that determines what your sentence is. It's the Idaho law that now says that you will be sentenced to this. Now, you really would take away the judiciary if we said, well, it's unconstitutional and we're not going to allow a judge to determine if it's unconstitutional. I think that's where you take away discretion or judicial discretion.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sheriff. We got one more. I couldn't see your light the way it's
Well,
supposed
I'm
to.
getting over here.
Representative Roden.
Mr. Chairman and Sheriff Clifford, I'll try not to be as long. Some of the reason that we hear some people argue against this, it seems, is that the prosecutors' dockets are already full, the dance card's full, and the jails are full. I understand now. This is what I understand, is that mandatory minimum convictions only make up 4% of our prison population at this time. That being said, 1, is that number correct? And 2, would there be room for these new, if there is an increase in convictions? It seems like an odd defense, but I thought perhaps, is there room at the end for if we come across this?
Chairman, Representative Roden, great question. I would say that there's not room anywhere in the state of Idaho in a jail or prison. I'm just being very frank. But I don't think that should deter us from justice. As a sheriff, it's a really strange double-edged sword. I've said it for years and years to say, you turn to your patrol, you say, go catch the bad guys, arrest the people that shouldn't be on the street, that are victimizing people, all that, and then they get in your jail and you say, how do we get these people out of our jail? Well, I'm not willing to give up justice and public safety because I need space in my jail. I want space in my jail, and I have to take care of those people and make sure they're cared for. But I'm not going to kick them out into the public just because I don't want to hold them. They need to be, again, brought to justice, held accountable. As far as are the numbers going to, I don't know the answer to your 4%. I don't know the answer. I'm sorry, I don't have that statistic. The answer to will arrests go up? I don't know. It's meant to be a deterrent. So in a perfect world, arrests would go down because we would have less fentanyl that comes in. What I do believe is a deterrent like mandatory minimums causes less fentanyl availability in our society. We've seen it with other things that we put into place by law here in Idaho. And I believe it will work with this too. I believe there will be a deterrent. So, we're not going to have an increase in 4%, I wouldn't believe, but I'm also not a crystal ball.
Now, thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Let's see.
Okay, so the hearing, I think, I mean, it went on, you can see 3 hours and 20 minutes or so. I'm not sure, I think they're continuing it onto Tuesday. So, yeah, Representative Tina Lambert is there, right here, and but she didn't say anything that I could see on the hearing, and then I didn't see Representative Durant speak on it. But I think they were pretty thorough about all of the concerns and the pros and cons, but I think everyone's minds are pretty much determined. Perhaps some of the representatives are, I don't know. I guess when it comes to a vote, I'll do another episode and they're going to do their debate on why they're voting or voting against. They have that option. All right, have a good one. Bye bye.